Hello and welcome to Ghaziabad Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. A petition seeking notification and implementation of guidelines for fixing accountability on schools for the safety of children has been filed in the Supreme Court. The petition has been filed by NGO Bachpan Bachao Andolan, run by Nobel Prize winner Kailash Satyarthi. The petitioner has prayed for a direction to the central government to notify and implement the fixing accountability of school management towards safety and security of children in school guidelines, or simply accountability guidelines. The accountability guidelines lay down the responsibilities of school management towards ensuring safety and security of children in schools, both government and private. The accountability guidelines prepared by the Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Human Resource Development, in consultation with the National Commission for the Protection of Child Rights, have not been notified yet. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze child safety in schools. Joining me on the program today are Jyoti Gupta, Director, DPS Sahibabad; Jyoti Mathur, Director, Training, Kailash Satyarthi Children's Foundation; Aditi Tandon, Special Correspondent of the Tribune; and Madulika Sharma, Advisor, Education, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Jyoti Mathur, I'd like to begin the program with you. Tell us more about the petition and what was the need to file this petition in the Supreme Court.
Sure. So this petition actually relates to safety of children in schools. In 2017, NCPCI, which is the premier institution in the country for protection of children, had developed a manual on safety and security of children. In 2018, they also developed guidelines for children living in hostels, that what guidelines, what procedures and methods should be followed so that children in hostels are safe. Thereafter, in 2018, the Ministry of Human Resource Development, they identified the responsibility of people to implement those guidelines, and they suggested that in the government schools, the SMC, and in the private schools, the PTA take the responsibility to ensure that these guidelines are implemented. But those are still draft guidelines. It has been almost a year. Basically, it shows that the willingness or the unwillingness on the part of the government to understand the necessity and the urgency in securing the right of children to safety and security seems to be lacking. So we, as an organization which works on child rights, specifically on child protection, so we thought we will push it through the courts and push it for the implementation of these guidelines, and that is why this writ petition was filed. Okay.
I'd like to bring in Madulika Sharma now into the picture because of what you just said. You know, Jyoti Mathur is suggesting that the government and the authorities seem to be dragging their feet as far as the accountability guidelines are concerned. Your thoughts on that?
NCPCR prepared these draft guidelines after it was decided with HRD that the Commission will be giving them a draft for fixing the accountability. Now, that draft was submitted to MHRD in October last year. And since then, the draft was also distributed among the state education departments and also among different boards and different relevant stakeholders. Whatever outputs, whatever inputs and suggestions, that we received, we also incorporated those suggestions. Now, since then, we have given from our part those guidelines, and now it is up to MHRD to actually bring them in, because as per, and I would like to draw your attention that these guidelines were not only framed because MHRD felt so. These guidelines were framed because the court in one of the writ petitions had categorically mentioned that the Secretary MHRD and MHRD as a department has to frame certain guidelines where the accountability of school management is fixed. You know, we have around 22 odd guidelines from different departments, not just MHRD or not just Education Department, which are there in place for building a safe school environment. And as Ms. Mathur has just mentioned, that we compiled those guidelines, we prepared a manual on safety and security of children, which was also adopted by different organizations, different boards, and for example, CBSE. And based on that manual only and taking it further, we laid down certain parameters, certain indicators that will fix the accountability of school management, because that is something which has been missing, and that is something which we need to really get into and bring it as soon as possible.
Okay, fixing management is fixing, some rules as far as school management is concerned is what the previous speaker has spoken about. So I'd like to bring Jyoti Gupta into the picture now. So what is it that the management has done really, not particularly your school, but if you look at it generally, at schools as a whole, what is it that schools have done, and what are the challenges really do you feel as far as safety and security in schools are concerned?
So, a lot of changes have come in the last few years, especially there have been a lot of cases that have come to the fore, not that these weren't happening earlier, but because of, I would say, media, a lot of cases in the past have come to the forefront. So, the managements have really been proactive in providing a safe and secure system for the children. Good private schools always had those systems whereby the manpower who is kept is actually verified by the police. Also, the cameras are there. Also, one ensures that the staff which is coming into the school is coming from a proper background. So, there are police checks, etc. When the children are traveling in the buses, there are safety and security guidelines, speed governors, the cylinders, the medical aid kits, everything is provided in the buses also. Similarly, the security that comes into the school, onto the gates, no unwanted or unwarranted people are allowed inside the schools. So, a lot of stress is laid on the safety and the security, because education, yes, they are coming to the school, they will be provided with the education, but if the parents are sending their most prized possession to the schools, it is first the safety and the security that they are concerned about.
Sure.
And that is what the schools have to provide.
Okay. Aditi, Tandon, that having been said, several measures have been taken. I mean, I'm not saying no, but despite that, we've heard some horrific stories coming out of not just any school, but some of the top private schools as well. So, what is the reason behind that?
Correct, Frank. I still remember the horrific incident that we all saw in Ryan International, Gurgaon. And if I am correct, it was September of 2017 that a child was found dead, with his throat slit in one of the bathrooms in the toilet in the school. And you also know how the investigation was botched up. First, some bus conductor was picked up, a gardener was also implicated. Eventually, it actually was revealed that one of the juveniles was responsible for the killing of the child. And for what did he kill the child? He just killed the child so that the due examination date, which was to fall in a day or two, could be postponed, because this child was not ready with his, textbook rehearsals and preparations. So that kind of an excuse was made by this juvenile to kill a small child. See, I think, Frank, that the school managements have to take responsibility and take complete responsibility, because you would remember that 2 years earlier there was a similar incident where a child was found dead in a tank, water tank or storage facility. I think that was also Ryan, if I am not correct, in some other city. These are international schools. We are not even beginning to talk about the infrastructure of safety in the government schools. Now, I have a problem with guidelines. I cover gender, I write on child education, education in general. I've seen this for ages. The Right to Education Act is a justiciable right of children, a right for which parents and children can actually move court, and they will be guaranteed this particular right if they do decide to go to the court for justice. A justiciable right is also not being given to the children of the country. Free education till elementary level, free and compulsory education is still not the reality of the day, despite the fact that we actually have a law. So, what is the legal force of the guidelines in question? I would like to ask the NCPCR, which has framed the guidelines. Guidelines are fine. How do they actually roll out in real life? When the HRD ministry does decide to implement them, there are so many schools out of the ambit of the HRD ministry. For instance, what about the private schools? These private schools are mostly affiliated with the CBSE. CBSE is not a statutory body. I still remember 3 years ago, there was a full-fledged debate around making the CBSE statutory body by passing an act of parliament. If I am correct, it started during the time when Kapil Sibal was HRD minister. But all that also fell by the wayside. So without the school boards actually having the force of the law, what is the sanctity, what is the legal standing of these guidelines? Are they not cosmetic? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, because you have to first create the infrastructure, you have to first create that conducive environment, you have to give the legal protection, and then you have to move forward with guidelines have to be enforceable, right?
Right. Yeah, your thoughts on that, Jyoti, Mathur, as far as the guidelines are concerned. What is it that you'd like to achieve with the result of these accountability guidelines? Do you believe that the end goals can be achieved and our schools will truly become safe and secure?
Actually, in this I would like to say that what NCPCR has prepared are the guidelines. But how to enforce them and whom to hold accountable, those guidelines have been developed by MHRD. So they have identified, like I said earlier, the SMC and the PTA, and they also have created the grievance redressal authorities, and if they don't respond, how do they escalate it further, the BEO, then the DEO and the education department, how to hold them accountable. It has laid down all those procedures. We have to first see how it actually works. Right now they are not even working, so we have to first see how it works and what are the challenges that are coming up. And the second thing I want to say is that these, I would like to treat these guidelines developed by NCPCR are more of preventive types. See, once the child falls off the safety net, there are laws. There is POCSO, there are other laws which take care of the child and provide all the support that the child needs. But what about before that? So before that, many things are happening in private schools, I must say they are doing good work. But what about other schools, like the schools where these tribal girls are going, where where these incidents happen? Like in January this year, in 2019, there was a case where a girl in one of these tribal schools, she delivered she was 8 months pregnant and she delivered a baby in the bathroom. So what care that girl was getting in that hostel? She was being neglected. So we first have to see these preventive kind of guidelines are there, and the structure that the MHRD is proposing for their implementation is at least starts getting implemented. Then we can see what are the challenges and then look.
Okay, the ball has to be set rolling is what you're suggesting. Only then can we get along with the learn as you go process.
Sure.
Until we test it, we don't really know what we have. Okay, so that having been said, so let's not forget, Madulika Sharma, the concerns of private and government schools are going to be very different. The concerns in the rural areas and the urban areas are going to be very, very different. So how are these guidelines really going to help? Are we going to have an all-encompassing kind of an accountability guideline, or is it going to be very specific? What is it really?
These are very relevant points that have been made right now. The guidelines that we are talking about here are the accountability guidelines, as in definitely there is a RT Act, and we can say that certain schools are not, they does not come under the ambit of RT Act. However, MHRD as a body, as a ministry, it has control over all the educational institutions that are there, be it minority institutions or be it private, and especially when we say that private institutions does not come under their mandate. As in, this is one of the biggest, what should I say, something that people don't get it right, that even the private schools, they are answerable to the education departments in their respective states, and for that matter to MHRD also. So when we say that we are making accountability guidelines, these are definitely certain preventive guidelines. We have taken into account all kind of schools that are there, and these are basically related to the safety of a child. So whenever a child is in a space where he or she has gone to learn something, and the certain basic things are, these always remain same. So the guidelines that has been prepared have been prepared keeping into mind all the differences and all, and also for private and government schools alike. In fact, when we talk about safety, we usually discuss the very, very sad incidents, and the incidents where either there has been a death or murder or sexual abuse or rape. But we often forget that safety is a very vast issue. It's not just related to a death of a child or physical well-being of a child. It also involves their mental well-being. It also involves every other dimension apart from infrastructure or apart from, you know, having CCTV cameras and having those window bars or whatever related to infrastructure. It is a very vast topic and we should consider it, and the preventive measures that have been given in those guidelines are addressing those issues. Second, when Supreme Court has ordered that this is a policy matter and this has to be taken forward by MHRD, so definitely when these guidelines will be implemented, they will be implemented under the umbrella of that particular order which Supreme Court has given. So it will be implementable as well. Yeah.
Some very valid points there made by Madulika Sharma, really, as far as safety is not just about, you know, the death of a child or ensuring that child is alive or ensuring that, you know, there is no sexual abuse, but also the mental health of a child. Really, that is something that is, you know, that should be in focus as well. And I'd like to bring you into the picture, Jyoti Gupta. You know, we have these issues like the blue whale challenge. Thankfully, that is behind us now. Then the other issue of TikTok now and making the news all over the place. So children have to be kept safe and away from these aspects as well. So till that time, we have guidelines or we have a proper structure in place. What more do you think needs to be done?
So talking to the children all the time and talking to the parents all the time is what needs to be done. The parents also have to talk to the children and the school also has to talk to the children. We have to monitor the screen time of the children, because these days there are so many collaborative games that are coming in. Children are in touch with the world outside, who they are playing with. They don't even know the virtual you know, friends they have can be double, triple their age, and they lure them, they call them to certain places. The children go missing from homes because you know, they are playing the games. So they need to be talked to, they need to be, this issue needs to be addressed. We cannot say that we can't monitor the children, we have to monitor them all the time. Who are their friends, who are they playing with, who are they interacting with, who are they actually friends with in school, outside the school. It all has to be monitored and we have to talk to them about these things more often than we actually do. So, you know, another thing that I would like to bring in here is that all schools come under the ambit of RTE also, and all schools are answerable to MHRD also. So, where the safety and security guidelines are concerned, we've received them from the CBSE. So, CBSE made it mandatory for all the schools to follow the safety and security guidelines. In fact, in their affiliation bylaws, these are there, the infrastructure as well as, you know, the verification of the staff, etc. So, we are supposed to do that. And we also get the guidelines from the state through the district magistrates and through our districts. We and the district inspector of schools, that is DIOSs, we do get the safety and security guidelines which start from the infrastructure, goes on to getting the verification of the staff, goes on to talking to the children, goes on to gender sensitization. So there is a lot that we do in the schools to ensure that. Apart from that, there are committees that are made by all schools where the parents are the members, the teachers are the members, the students are the members, and these committees meet at least once in a month and they act as advisories to the management and to the principal of the school. So wherever they feel that there can be a problem, these are brought to the notice of the schools and it is taken care of. Now, it is safety and security is actually a right of a student. You know, every child has the right to be secure, whether the child is going to a government school or is going to a private school. The private schools still have the you know, means to provide the basic safety and security to the children. But once you go to the government schools, you don't see these security guards there, you don't see the cameras there. Most of the schools, the government schools, are even without the boundary walls.
Right.
There are no basic boundary walls, there are no toilets. Even if the toilets are there for the girls, they are not covered. They don't have the doors. the basic drinking water is not there.
Right.
That's also a security hazard. If you're not giving the basic drinking water to the children, I mean, at the end of the day, they can fall sick, which can later on lead to another problem.
Yeah.
So all these things have to be addressed. The
Sure.
mental health, you know, today the corporal punishments are obviously, you know, or we don't even talk about that. So even talking to the children in the correct tone is important. They are very, you know, it brings mental stress to the children.
Sure.
So there is a lot that needs to be done here.
Absolutely. There's a lot that needs to be done. In my closing comments, of course, I'll talk about the best way forward. But before that, you know, Aditi, as far as government schools, the rural side of it is concerned, there are some major challenges that need to be addressed. How do you see these challenges being addressed? Do you believe that we need to probably strengthen the legal system, the legal fraternity, and maybe the laws themselves? Or how do we approach this?
You see, first of all, you know, even at the cost of sounding a little cynical, I would reiterate, Frank, that I take the point that NCPCR expert made, that the mental well-being is very important, but let's first ensure that children are not dying in our schools, that children are not being raped and sexually abused in our school spaces, because these are heinous crimes. Mental well-being, of course, you know, schools still have counselors, there are orientation sessions that go on, but various grave crimes are currently happening in school spaces, and we all hear about them all the time. We also recently saw a very horrific incident in Bihar's Muzaffarpur, where in a child shelter home, the manager of the shelter home himself was a sexual predator. The case is still dragging on. We haven't reached anywhere yet. I come back to my old point of the fact that we actually need zero tolerance in the system, and zero tolerance cannot come from NCPCR alone or from Bachpan Bachao Andolan alone or parents alone. It has to be a social collective. Everybody has to understand that children have to be, children are precious and they have to be saved at every cost. For instance, my question would be, was Ryan International actually disaffiliated by the CBSE for the death of the child that happened? It's all too well to say that CBSE has sent us safety guidelines, you know, there are these audits, it has. But my question is, have you ever in your own history as an anchor heard of a school being disaffiliated by the CBSE or by any board or by any state government? The experts are repeating that MHRD has control over schools, right? State governments have control over schools. Education is a concurrent subject. Both center and state have a role to play. So have we heard of zero tolerance policy from either the government or a private management or from a government school? Has any school being actually closed down even for 2 days for the fact that children have died under the care of managers of the school? For the first time, I think a good step that was taken was in the last session of this government. If you remember, Frank, in the POXO Act, a major amendment was brought, and for the first time it was said that if a child is subjected to aggravated assault, which aggravated assault was defined as the fact that if a child has been sexually assaulted by a person who is in a position of trust and authority, which can be the manager of a child shelter home, which can be a school principal or a school teacher. That was the first time an Indian law actually responded independently to this kind of crime, which is becoming very routine in our schools, in all our spaces. And it was said that death penalty will be prescribed. So these are the kind of deterrents the society needs, and everybody down the line from the NCPCR, which is responsible for child safety, they're doing their job, and it's a welcome thing that they're doing. But independently of others, they cannot achieve their objective.
So it has to be a holistic approach, really, and also stricter action needs to be taken when a case like this comes to the fore, is what you're suggesting.
I think schools, when they, when private schools set up their, set up their infrastructure, and when a private school opens up, for instance, when buildings are these days constructed, every building has to comply with building bylaws, every building has to comply with earthquake resistant materials. Every school should also comply with certain basic safety standards for children. Only then should you permit a school.
All right. Closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Jyoti Mathur, with the best way forward.
The best way forward is to start implementing what we have currently with us, because a lot of effort has gone into making these guidelines. All the guidelines have been basically issued by CBSE from time to time. So they have been put together with additional inputs that what should be done in a school and in a hostel. So they should start be implementing. So
Sure.
that is the first step that I would say
Okay.
should happen.
Madulika Sharma?
We have been talking about that schools have certain responsibility, NCPCR has certain responsibility, other stakeholders have responsibility. But I think now it is the time that we hold everyone actually responsible, answerable to how they are working on their responsibilities to be fulfilled. So that is one gap that needs to be filled in, that when we start holding accountability for one, the school management accountable for one small negligence on their part. I would also draw your attention towards the JJ Act. That's an excellent act that we have. And there is a section on neglect, and which is equally applicable to all the schools. So when we actually implement these provisions that we have in hand, the things are going to change, definitely.
Okay. Jyoti Gupta?
So I would say that the schools are already implementing the acts, and we have the infrastructure and also the the provisions for all the safety and security guidelines that have been provided to us by the state and by the CBSE. The only thing is that the parents should have more trust in the schools, and the schools are accountable for the children who are coming to them. They are responsible. The day we say that we are not responsible, the parents will not give us their most prized possession.
Okay.
So they are our responsibility.
Okay. All right. And Aditi Tandon, close the show for us with your concluding
Yeah,
remarks.
I think safety audits on regular intervals, at least thrice a year should be there, and then schools should also have a system of yearly renewals. Safety in the campuses of schools should be determined, and I think ISO certification on safety guidelines, because a lot of private schools that I know have actually gone ahead voluntarily and taken ISO certification for safety standards. I think that's a first good step to start. Every school should come forward, management should come forward voluntarily and subject themselves to this kind of safety audit. If they do indeed feel responsible towards children, and accountability should be fixed right from the level of the owner down to the school principal. It can't be that the school principal alone is held liable.
Sure. All right. With that, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. What's coming out of this discussion is that it's everyone's responsibility, really, to keep our children safe and secure. So we need to rise up as a society and ensure that we keep our children safe and secure, not just now, but in the future as well. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.